Welcome to the radon class. Let's start off by talking about why home inspectors are involved with radon. In New York State, license law, as you'll see known on the very first page of license law, if you've read it, says that home inspectors do not, as part of our home inspection license, do not do radon and do not do termites. Tonight we're going to talk about radon. How do I square those two things?
2 reports.
Huh?
2 reports.
Because it says that we're not required, but we can do it.
It doesn't say we're prohibited.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that we're prohibited from doing it. What it really does is literally says, and you kind of bounced around it. You say 2 reports. We send the client a radon report from the laboratory. I'm not doing, I'm just an agent of the laboratory. I'm not doing that service of reporting on radon underneath the authority of my home inspection license. I'm doing a home inspection license and I'm setting out radon. I'm setting out radon as an agent of the laboratory. The laboratory is licensed. So I'm operating under their license, one might say. Yes, Jason?
Would that be a different contract that you have in the beginning?
No.
It's all under?
You probably should, to the letter of the law. I shouldn't report on the radon findings on my home inspection report, but who's going to challenge it? Who cares? You know, there may be a situation where having the radon report on my home inspection license invalidates my report. But all of a sudden, if I was in a messy situation in court, that may come into play. But all I'm doing is providing a service. So this school, a home inspection school, one of our nights, one of our lessons is radon, because if there's one thing radon is, it's another source of income. Period. End of story. If you do not do radon testing, you're going to find that that realtors may not want to use you. It's that simple. They don't want to have to invite a guy out for a home inspection. They don't want to invite somebody else out for termite. They don't want to invite somebody else out for radon. They don't want to invite somebody else out for septic. So they invite one guy out, that's you, to do the majority of that. We don't do septic, and we draw the line at septic, but we don't draw the line when it comes to doing radon and generating a termite inspection and a radon, even though the license says we don't do that. So let's talk about radon. Jason, what are these dots?
Radon particles.
And those radon particles, are they radioactive or not?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Where do radon particles come from?
Uranium.
Uranium. What is it? Is it a gas?
Uranium.
No, the radon particles.
Yeah, that's it.
They call it a gas. I think it's just an atom, but it's a decay. As the uranium decays, its off product are these particles. To call it a gas, I'm not a scientist, so I wouldn't know. The book and everything I've read calls it a gas, but what it does is it releases over time these radioactive particles that float around in the air. Those particles, when breathed in, can cause harm to your lungs. Why do you think that basements are where or the lowest livable floor is where we do our test?
Probably where the most concentration of radon is.
Why wouldn't I go after the average concentration? Why wouldn't I go after the least concentration? Why wouldn't I do my measurements there? What's their thinking?
So if it's in the basement, it'll get dispersed through the house.
Highest concentration is the most dangerous.
and they want to know what the most dangerous level of that is going to be. Exactly. Okay, lowest livable floor. If there's one thing that's going to happen, is that's where your liability is. That's your liability. That's the only thing we have to do with the test, is location of the radon test. Whether we're using electronic or canisters, doesn't matter. The location, and we'll get into exactly what the proper location is, etc., in a little bit. But the location of the lowest livable floor is where our liability lies. If you put it in the wrong place, and then it's too high, and they put a system in and find out that you were wrong in the process, they could sue you for the cost of that system, because your house really didn't need the system, but you used it in the crawl space underneath the house. Because by my definition, crawl spaces underneath the house aren't livable spaces. We'll get into what defines a livable space in a minute.
What about basement or cellar with a dirt floor, is that considered livable?
It depends on your laboratory. Your laboratory will, because it's their license. The EPA was, the way they handled this is they wrote the language about where the proper place was, or to do the test, to be vague enough to allow the industry to define it for itself. That's kind of what they do with mold. They wrote the language, New York State wrote the language vague enough that the industry, everybody complains about the vagueness, but then the industry has some freedom to go out there and define what they want to define. That's exactly what's happening in mold, or radon. The industry, and so the laboratories want to have a certain consistency about what they call, because they all want to be able to compete for the same business. So the laboratories have kind of come up with the definition of a livable space as something that has a concrete floor or a finished surface, has a ceiling high enough as a general interior room so you don't have to stoop, and that could be finished off. So a basement that is unfinished, as long as it has a concrete floor and could be made into a living area, qualifies. Now, if I have a laundry area downstairs, that means the wife may go down there and do her ironing and etc. She may spend extended amount of time down there. Or a workbench where the guy may be a tinker and go down and work. So therefore, if I see any of those type of, either a laundry area or a workbench or something like that, by very definition of what I see there, it's a livable floor. But my laboratory that I use, that I kind of generated my theory around, was I needed a concrete floor and a ceiling high enough so that a normal-sized guy can walk around and do whatever it is. Because I'm not responsible for the way that that basement is currently being used now. I'm responsible for the way that it may be used in the future. And since I don't know, I imagine in my mind, can somebody come in here and put up studs, hang drywall, and make a daycare center out of this basement? Or keep the kids down here for their playroom? Or make it a teenager's room? If the answer is yes to any of those, then it's the lowest livable floor. So how do you think we handle it when it's a two-story, when it's a second-floor condo, and we're asked to do a home inspection and a radon test? What do? You go into the basement.
No, you just do it to the second floor, because that's the home you're testing, right?
That is exactly right. Does it matter to you whether it's the second floor or the first floor?
No.
No, right. The language of the contract said that they wanted a radon test. Did you make that decision? No, they did, correct? So if they made the decision that there's going to be a radon test, you're not the arbiter
Right.
of what goes into the contract and what doesn't go into the contract. Oh, I wish I had that power. But it does, so you're going to do the radon test, and the lowest livable floor in a second story condo is the second floor, so you're going to put it there, correct?
Correct.
So if there's a common area basement with, washers and dryers, you wouldn't,
That's
It's a
not-
common area, it's not a part of the real estate transaction. All I'm responsible for is the condo. Now, and I've done that, and that's why I brought that up. I did a condo on a second floor in Saratoga, and they asked for radon. And so I did a radon test for them. I told my client this was silly. He says, but it's a contract, and it's in the contract. I said, you can waive it. He says, oh, what the hell, let's go. So he just gave me $100. I said, fine, I'll take the $100. Do the radon test. Okay, so uranium is in the soil. It's a rock. It gives off these gas particles. The reason why there's heavier concentrations in the basement is there's less ventilation in the basement. So, what do? If you have a basement that's an old crickety old basement that is livable, but the windows don't close or can't be closed?
We do about the radon testing?
Yes, because the radon testing has to be in an enclosed environment. They want you to close it up prior to going in and doing your radon, and then you put your radon in and it has to maintain its closeness. So now you have a basement that you cannot close the windows.
You have to go up to the first floor where you can test it?
What did the open windows make it a non-livable floor?
When to throw off your whole test?
It will, so what do?
Make a note of it?
No, what I do is I go to my realtor and I say to my realtor, you may want to, we have to do something. I can't do a radon test here because it won't be a valid test because I can't maintain an enclosed environment. And then they either take it out of the contract or my client waives it, etc., or they say, don't worry about it, Dan, do it or don't do it. But so I'm going to present to them my problem. It is a livable floor, because just because it's an open window doesn't make it an unlivable floor. And I can't seal it, so therefore I go to the realtors and tell them that I can't do the radon test and why I can't do the radon test, and they'll give me guidance. It's not my call. But what is my call is where it's located. And I'm not going to put it in an unventilated, in a ventilated room, and I'm going to not do it. And I'm not going to go up to another floor. So all three situations I can't, so I'm going to go to them and throw that problem into their lap, and then they will give me guidance. All right, does that make sense? Your only mandate, just remember this, is location. And it has to be a sealed location, and it has to be a livable floor, lowest livable floor. Crawl spaces under basements don't work. If you have a livable floor, first floors don't work. Now, I've done tests on the first floor, but I've done it in the basement also, because I had a stone fireplace and granite countertops. And I was concerned about the stone fireplace giving off radon. And it was a big piece of Lake George property. It was multi-million dollars, and so I said, you think maybe I should do it up here with all that stone and the granite fire countertops? He says, yes, let's do it. So I did it in the basement, and I put another test up on the first floor. So we have this unventilated area, and this is the most dangerous area for the radon and the inhalation of the radon. It doesn't cause asthma. It doesn't cause any other medical issue, the radon particles, except that it does have the possibility of causing cancer. So there's no way to determine what the story is, or whether anybody's sick or any other symptoms. You have to take this test. The canisters are then deployed in the basement, and they are left there for a minimum of 48 hours to 5 days. 5 days times 24 is 5 times 12 is 60, 120 hours. Sometime in between that. Guess where I get those numbers from? 48 to 120.
The lab.
Thank you, exactly right. The laboratory determines what their protocols are and what their minimum time standard is and what their maximum time standard is. And the way I remember that is I changed laboratories and I went out 6 days and they wouldn't take it. So some labs, everybody goes with 2 days. That's the minimum if somebody says, I took a radon sample, there is one inspector that's not in our region, and I know he walks in with an electronic machine at the beginning of the inspection, plugs it in the basement, goes about his inspection, comes back and pulls the plug on it and takes the number and reports that as radon findings. That's dishonest, and it's also not accurate. It has to be in the environment for a 48-hour period of time. Yes?
Why is it dishonest and why is it,
Because it's not a real test, and he's making it sound like a real test. A real test takes 48 hours.
but from a lab standpoint, right? So he's not a lab.
He's not a lab, but he's operating under their license.
Okay. So he's operating under their license and not following their protocol. Is the
That's
issue.
exactly right.
Okay.
Is right. Because the industry has decided that it takes at least measuring to find the concentration, the proper concentration of radon in this enclosed area, your medium or your canisters or your machine, whatever the medium is, must be exposed for the minimum 48 hours to get the accurate reading. There are such things as Geiger counters, or operate as a Geiger counter, and I can walk around in this room and I'll be reading radon. But does that tell me the concentration? Or do contractors walk around a basement with this Geiger counter and find a sump hole and come over here and find a higher rating here, so he puts his remediation system here instead of over there? That's what the Geiger counter's for. But does that tell me concentrations? No, it doesn't. I know that I have some radon there more than any other place, so I'm putting my remediation system there in that location. But the industry wants to get to a concentration, so many parts per million. Now, the cutoff, after you put your equipment in the basement or lowest level floor, you're going to get a reading. Picocurie, PCLI, I think it is, 4.0. It's basically 4 parts per million. Is the level that the industry says above that concentration of 4.0 is dangerous to your health, and underneath it is safer than dangerous. Still dangerous, but safer. And what I mean by that, one particle, if radon can cause cancer, doesn't matter how thick it is. If you breathe in one and it's only 1 part in the whole room and you happen to breathe it in and it eventually caused cancer, that's dangerous to you, just not dangerous to everybody else. So they had to come up with a way to determine whether an environment was safe or not safe. So they put a bunch of pointy-head mathematicians in the room, and they did some insurance adjustment, cost analysis, risk analysis, etc. together. And somehow they came up with a concentration of 4 parts per million. You had the same risk of getting lung cancer as a person driving around in their neighborhood, getting in a car accident and dying. They knew what the statistics were for how many people die out of 100,000 in a car accident in their own neighborhood. But they determined that, well, geez, if you're willing to drive around the car, even though you may die, that's an acceptable risk. So, 4 parts per million, anything higher than that, is a higher risk of dying from cancer than dying in an automobile accident in your local neighborhood. Anything underneath that is less of a risk of dying in your car in an accident in your neighborhood. Because they say over 4 is an unacceptable risk, under 4 is an acceptable risk. But The EPA has said 2.0 picocurie liters is a health risk, just not a danger. This area, the industry says, should be remediated, but we're not going to stop your transaction based on that. 2 to 4. Underneath 2 is not a risk. And I know from my own testing, 0.7 picocurie liters is approximate outside air. We're always being subjected to 0.7. So 4.0 is your reading. Well, let's just say it's 5.5. You go into a house, you come back with 5.5. Anybody want to tell me what happens to the real estate transaction at that time?
Done.
Huh?
So
No?
put on hold until the remediation system is put in.
No?
Goes back to the negotiating table.
Thank you. It's to the table. Buyer may decide, I'll eat the $1,800 to remediate it. Or buyer says to seller, you remediate or I walk. All this does is give him an out with his deposit. It's only an $1,800, $2,000 expense that should be done. That person can accept the risk, waive the radon, still move in and not remediate it. Nobody's making him remediate. All that the 4.0 is a warning to the buyer. This may be a health hazard, this basement. It will cost $2,000 to remediate, and you get your deposit back if you decide to walk. Now, one of the neat things about the law in New York State is even if it only costs $800 to remediate, health hazards like mold and radon are automatic. Walk away from the deal, get your deposit back no matter what it costs to remediate. I even had a client that the day the seller found out that he had radon, he immediately went out and within 2 days had a radon mitigation system installed in his house. Did that save the deal? No, because he had the client always, the buyer always has the option to walk when it's a health hazard, whether it's been remediated or not. In this situation, the one that I know about, he had 4 children, he was an attorney, and he had 4 kids that were all between the age of 5 and 15, and he just walked from the deal, even after they did it, because the law allows you to walk on the deal and get your deposit back, even though, if it's a health hazard, even though it's been remediated. And I'm pretty sure in almost every situation on anything, I can't remember, Joe, can you remember? If somebody remediates a problem without involving you in the remediation, no matter what it is, you don't have to accept that remediation. I know that you have to be involved with the mold and the buyer and okay that. The buyer can walk even though the seller remediates it on his own, and apparently it's taken care of.
There's some, I just did a mold assessment, it was remediated, and the client is walking because he doesn't want to deal with the house. The sellers are refusing to give the deposit back, so they have to sue to get the deposit back.
Well, on a health issue, they don't have.
They're gonna lose.
They're gonna lose.
They're gonna lose, but,
Right.
you know, it's just
Who
one
wants to go through the 3 months it's gonna take for
to
some
get
judge
$1,000 back.
to give you deposit back, exactly.
So, but
Isn't
you are-
that true on almost any defect? It doesn't have to be health, that the buyer has to sign off on the remediation. Now, typically they do because they want the house.
For the mold and for the radon.
I think almost anything, if it's a major. and I-
Health hazard?
No, I mean, it's for things that aren't health hazards.
Oh, anything that's a major defect, there's gotta be communication between both
But
parties.
just fixing it's not enough to get
No.
my trust back. The thing is, I like the house or I wouldn't sign the contract.
Yeah,
So it
but
depends on what it is.
they gotta agree on that, hey, we got
But
this
if you
fixed.
want out of it and the seller fixes it, that doesn't mean
It
anything.
doesn't, yeah, he's gonna have to fix it anyhow. It's a major defect, he can get out. Unless, this is my observation, unless, like, so, for example, you're the seller, you have Bode Foundation, and we agree on like, okay, if you fix it, I'll buy it. Then I can't back out, because we had a verbal conversation in this contract that
Yeah,
I.
but you should be able to bring in an engineer or an expert and tell me whether it's actually really properly fixed or not. You should have that
I
option.
should be able, yes.
Right, because
Yeah.
what I call fixed and what you
You
call
call fixed, it'd be two different things,
is
correct.
two different things.
Yep.
Exactly right. Okay,
So if, on the radon, what I've been doing is I took the 28-hour class. There's a radon, class that you can take through InterNACHI, which you guys are all members of. There's some really good charts in there that talk about if you're a smoker or if you're a non-smoker and the level of radon that's measured, what is the possibility of getting lung cancer
Yeah,
out
it
of 1,000
changes this
people?
if you're a
It
smoker.
completely changes. So,
Much higher.
yeah, the possibility, if you smoke, the possibility, they get into more of the scientific. We're not gonna get into the scientific. It gets in a little bit about alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma particles and things like that.
okay, now that you took that, I want you to pay special attention to this and you're gonna give me the right language.
Okay,
You ready?
yes, sir.
Okay, they say that I'm an excellent drawer.
Charles is good at Phone home.
Your beautiful wife. I won't go into any more details.
I love this stuff getting recorded.
These are lungs for the record. Okay.
That's what they mean when they say, what a set of lungs that gal's got.
Yep, that's exactly. Radon particles. I did that national 3-day course about 10 years ago, and there was only one of 6 guys in the whole state that had that I let it lapse. Now, but anyway, so I've been through
So you know it.
one of the association's officials.
Yeah.
But that was 10, 12 years ago. So they've subjected me one, and that's a bitch of a test for the record.
It is, to get nationally certified, it's scientific. This isn't like, it's not a home inspection. This is not a home inspection, what we're
There's
teaching
a
about.
lot of math.
This is completely different. It's an ancillary service, has nothing to do with home inspections, and if you want to get nationally certified, there is a physics background about all this, about protons, electrons, how they're releasing, and the amount of millivolts, and there's a lot to it.
So that was 10 years ago. I have a poor memory. I'm going to tell you my normal story, Joe, and I want you to tell me where it differs with what you read in NACHI.
Okay.
Okay? This radon particle is being breathed in. Here's the next atom, probably not the right term. That is this particle. And when she breathes it in, it is going, well, one of the things about this atom is it's floating in the air all on its own. When it runs into an H2O, and I know that that's the wrong way, H2O, or moisture, or a water particle, it neutralizes the radon particle. So, this, without combining with a water particle, is dangerous. And what happens is it is breathed in and goes down to the lungs. Now this particle is floating there in the lungs probably for 1/100th of a second before it runs into the mucous lining of the lungs. And during this period, it is traveling down the esophagus. Again, no problems. And when it gets here, one thing has to happen in this 1/1000th of a second. it hits a half-life and gives off a, what's the term?
It's radiation energy. And that's
Radiation energy. And it does that once and only once in that particle's existence. When it gives off that, it must be suspended here prior to the moisture contact, but in the lungs. And it's this energy, what'd you call it again?
When it releases, it's radioactive energy.
That radioactive energy damages the lining of the lungs. Does it immediately cause cancer? They haven't been able to determine that, but they do believe there's a strong correlation of that damage of high levels of radon on the lung that then creates an environment for the cancer to start up.
Changes your DNA.
It changes
Yeah,
the
it starts changing the tissues and starts changing the DNA in your body.
So-
around that location.
the mathematical radon particle floating around. First of all, remember, it left its uranium home. It floated up here. It got trapped into the attic. It was sucked in by a negative pressure, maybe the sump hole or something. It leaked into the house. It then gets into the house, and she's doing the laundry, and then she brings this particle in. So right now it's been alive probably for 3 or 4 days, this atomic particle that's just floating around, and then it hits a certain half-life point, and at that exact point when it releases the energy, it then turns, and it happened to be suspended for that 100,000th of a second before it got absorbed into the moisture. So it had to enter the lung, it has to hit that spot, the sweet spot. It's, once it hits the lung, how long can you imagine that particle before, because you are breathing the whole time, so the pressure is going to be pulling those particles into the moisture of the mucus of the lungs, because that's exactly what air does. It's going to the, and that's how oxygen is transferred through the body. So it can't be in the lung for much longer than 1,000th of a second, where it's suspended prior to the moisture, and then this energy is given off and damage the lung. So it takes a hell of a lot of radon particles to be doing that, to catch one of them at that point. Now,
So what ends up, there's all different kinds, right? There's alpha, gamma, and beta and gamma. And some move faster than the others. The heaviest is an alpha, so it suspends in the air, right? Where beta, it'll go through your clothes, and gamma's, it actually has to be stopped through concrete. So we're a little bit more worried about the alpha particles that are kind of floating in the air. And they have a half-life of like 3.8 days,
right.
right? So when it changes and goes through that half-life, when it's in, so it's all about duration and time. That's why they talk about the lowest livable space. That if you are doing laundry down there, whoever's doing it is down there for long periods of time. So it's duration. So you're inhaling it, exhaling it, and inhaling it. So you may have these half-lives go on over a period of time, and it's not going to be immediate. But they do correlate this radon to lung cancer, and the reason why is there were studies back in the day during the coal mining days, and they were digging up the earth. That's where they started getting this information about the radon and the coal miners, and actually getting lung cancer and things of that nature.
That's when they thought it was dangerous. These guys who were exposed to uranium were having higher levels of lung cancer, and so they determined that it was the actual radon particles that did it.
Yep, and this is above and beyond your knowledge of what you need to act as an agent
For the laboratory.
for the laboratory.
Location, location, location.
Yep.
But there's a lot of realtors out there and a lot of people out there that are misinformed. The first time I went out to do a radon test, the realtor informed me that the proper location of these 2 canisters, one should be on the first floor and one should be on the second floor. And said that with absolute 100% conviction. And that's totally wrong. Needs to be on the lowest livable floor. He didn't know what he was doing, but you are going to get into situations where the location that you're deploying your canisters are at is called into question. And the severity of this issue is going to get called into question. That's why we're bothering to give you a little bit more of the background behind the radon risk, and then how it's taken care of, what your options are. Any questions so far? Just remember, it's this alpha particle that fires off at the half-life that damages the lung. Doesn't necessarily cause cancer then. Those people may not get cancer, they just have a higher risk of getting cancer when the concentration is 4.0 or higher, picocurie meters. Okay, let's talk about the testing types and location. What?
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah, why don't you give it?
Plus, I got sheets for them all, so they got, you know how to fill out the sheets, how to fill it out, how to
Sure.
set it up and stuff.
So your client calls you up, he needs a home inspection, a radon, and a termite. So you say, that's fine. And you're going to show up at the house with the radon canisters. You're going to do your complete inspection. And then I deploy it at the last thing I do in the basement before I close the basement door. Don't do it up front because you're going to be walking in and out through various doors and people are going to be coming in. We want to seal the lowest livable floor as clearly, as well we can. So when you're doing your inspection, pay attention to your basement windows to make sure that they're closed at the time of your inspection. Make sure the doors are closed, etc. The question is going to arise, the homeowner is going to ask you if he's there, can I even go into my basement? And the answer is yes. Normal activities. Don't leave the basement door open, close the door, but that doesn't prohibit you from going downstairs or coming back up or your wife doing laundry, etc. Normal behavior, just don't leave the windows or the doors open.
Can the test tell if they want to crack those windows in order to affect the outcome?
We'll get there in a minute. So what we're going to do is we are going to deploy the radon canisters. And it's basically a charcoal substance. It's ground charcoal, just pressed together in a cake. That's got this little screen on the top so that it can't fall loose or out. Jason, you've seen these, haven't you?
I have not.
Okay. Now, I'm going to expose these to the air for a matter of 48 hours. Let's talk about location. You have a basement. Here we're looking down at the basement. First of all, I need to be at least 3 foot away from an exterior wall. Did you read the same thing, Joe? Exterior or any wall?
He stepped out.
I believe, as I remember, they talked exterior walls. But I don't believe it's because it's an exterior wall. I believe it should be within 3 foot away, 3 foot from any wall, because what they're looking for is normal room ventilation, normal room circulation. When they say 3 foot away from a wall, I was taught exterior walls, but that doesn't make sense to me. Almost any wall. Shouldn't be up against any wall, correct?
It can be up to an internal wall, like the dividing wall of a basement.
See, I don't buy that.
Okay.
And you know why I don't buy it?
Yeah, help me out.
I'm not worried about penetration from the exterior. I'm worried about the normal room circulation.
Oh, okay.
And there's less room circulation up against the wall.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Okay.
So any wall would qualify as blocking that normal ventilation. So I don't know why they would say the exterior walls and not also include the interior walls. And I know I was taught exterior walls, but I think the issue is ventilation, and that's why it should be any wall.
So the sheet that you're getting passed out is from this particular company that we talked about, Ray Data. on the second page with all the wording, they actually give you the instructions, okay, of how to operate their particular containers. There's many companies out there. Read this over, understand it. Okay, this is the guidance that you're going to be following. Okay.
And I'll tell you why I use Ray Data in a second. I use Ray Data, and there's another one in New York, there's a couple more in New York, and there are laboratories everywhere, but I have a particular reason why I use RA Data. So the first criteria is 3 foot away from an exterior wall, and then here's your ground look. And then I want 3 foot above the floor. And then I want it not around the heating system, the hot water heater, bathroom, faucet, or anything else, not around a moisture producing device. So humidifier, I don't want it around. I don't want it around a dehumidifier fan, because now I got the fan action,
Changing the, yeah.
and it doesn't. And now I don't get the typical room's ventilation process.
The water particles act as a barrier, okay?
And it
So
also is going to give you a
it
false
neutralizes.
reading lower.
Yep,
So it could be a 5, but you have it in a bathroom that's being used, and there's water being generated in there, and so your level is going to come down to 2 when it really should have been a 5. So you have to keep it away from moisture, fans, heating systems, etc. Find a neutral space. Some guys will bring one of those portable little stands that you can carry in your car, open it up and just set it in the middle of the room. But it all is going to depend on what's going on in the room that you're in. If I'm doing it in the first floor and it's the middle of the living room, it's not going to, kids are going to run into it, etc. It's going to, so you have to find a place to put it. Sometimes that's not as easy as said, but you have to find it. Go into one of the bedrooms, put it on top of a dresser. I have a radon test in progress laminated sheet that I put underneath this, and you can pin it on the basement door. The radon test in progress, please do not disturb, or something to that effect.
I have those door tags. I got door tags with
Yep,
mine that
can
you hang on the door.
buy door tags and things like that.
Okay, so I don't want to be around moisture, so it shouldn't be in the kitchen, it shouldn't be in a bathroom. I can't have it around fans.
If you say near, is that what, 5 feet, 10 feet? I mean, how
The
close?
vagueness of the language.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what near is. Because near in one house may be not near in another because of a wall in between, or a fan blowing, or something like that. So use your best judgment. Remember, we're only liable to the standard that a regular home inspection using due care and due diligence would have done. So if you're limited in areas, every home inspector would have been limited in area, and almost anything you do is probably defendable. But don't put it up against a wall if you have a clear open room and no reason not to do that. Use your best judgment.
So what is the approximate distance that the 2 cans need to be? From
All
one
right,
another?
we haven't got there yet, hold on.
I
Now,
was gonna test it. Sorry.
you'll get there. This is put into a machine once you've exposed it. Once you've exposed this for 48 hours, you mail it back to the laboratory, and they've got a billion-dollar machine there that's going to analyze this and give you a reading as to how many picocurie-liters it is. And it may come back 2.8. But let's just say it comes back 7.5. 7.5 on this. Is that the end of the world for your test? What do you think they tell you to do?
Test it again.
That's why we deploy 2 at the same time. Because they check each other. Now, if they both came back within 10% of each other, that's my second test. That's why when you use canisters and then deploy 2 canisters and they have to be sitting in the same place in the room. So the rule of thumb is, that's what Joe was getting to, they have to be within 6 inches of each other. Not on one side of the basement and another one on the other side of the basement. They have to be basically identical tests done. Now, the reason they did this is they don't want a real estate transaction being held up for the week that it's going to take to do one, and then another week to do the retest. So what they do, the industry, because they want to get this transaction done and everybody moved in and the money transacted, etc., is they conduct with 2 canisters at exactly the same time. One's the verifying factor over the other. They have to read within this amount, 10% of each other, or then they can call it a failed test, and you have to either retest or, I'm not sure. I've only had it happen one time, that one of them came out 12 and the other came out 3. That's more than 10% spread. There's a lot of reasons for that, we'll get into it in a second. But if you're using canisters, and I recommend you start off using canister, low cost, 32 bucks. You can buy them 1, 2, or 3 at a time, 4 at a time, a dozen of these. I buy about 6 of them at a time. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt. The 2 containers that you had, the 2 canisters, one was like wrapped in like a purple wrapping and one was in a blue.
That's just electrical tape to ensure the seal.
Okay, so there's no difference in the container.
They're
Okay.
exactly the same container, just a different colored electrical tape. These aren't good, they aren't valid canisters. He's not planning on using them. It's probably from 2 different tests.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Because, a little side fact, this is the article over in the corner that has a little square around it. If you're doing just a screening for a house, it's not for a real estate transaction, do one. It's the real estate transaction that requires the assurance of a second test to document each other. But trust me, I don't see these come back wrong. It's getting shipped back to a piece of equipment that's calibrated on a daily basis. So these are as accurate as it gets, and we'll get to that in a second. These are accurate, and I would say failure-proof. The reading you're going to get is the reading you're going to get. So if you're ever curious as to what the radon measurement is in your house, use 1 canister, don't use 2. And then the next time somebody says to you, could you do a screening? I'm getting ready to sell my house and I'd like to find out whether I have a radon issue or not at a pre-listing inspection. Use 1 canister. It's not for the real estate transaction, so there's no specific law saying you can't just use 1 canister. I had an inspector confess to me, he'd been inspecting now for 8 years, he's never used 2 canisters, and nobody's ever called him on it. He's always used just 1. No names will be said. So, 2 canisters, 6 inches apart, middle of the room, 48 hours goes by. You come back to the house, you seal it up, you put your tape back around it, seal it in tight. You do that to both of them. Fill out your form. Let's look at the front of the form. Your name, your mailing address, your city, test address, city, state, zip code, and then the county. And this is a Connecticut laboratory, so you have to tell them what state it's from.
It's a Jersey laboratory.
That's what I meant, New Jersey laboratory.
On the Connecticut's bigger suburbs.
And where that, you were attesting to the house was closed before and then after, or when you got there. Name of the person who, and so you put your own name in both of those lines, and then the canisters were opened, put the time of day. Let's say you did a 1 o'clock inspection, it's 3 o'clock, you're putting it out there 3 on November 17th, 2017, and you put it out at, and you picked it up at noon on the 19th. Does that sound right?
No.
So, The 17th, I put it out at 3 o'clock. And I go back on the 19th, 48 hours later, and I pick it up at noon. What's wrong with that?
That's not right. It's 3 hours off.
So why do you, so can I make a suggestion? I know this is what I do. I don't ever pick it up on the second day. Because any time on the third day or the fourth day, then it doesn't matter what time I get there. What if I can only make it at noon because I have an afternoon inspection? So when I put something in on the 13th, the first time I'll pick it up is the 16th. Now I don't ever have to worry about what time of day. It's always going to be between 48 and 72. That's my third day. And also, I don't want to wait till the fourth day, because if your realtor screws you over and doesn't show up and let you into the house, now you don't have a day to play with. Now you got to get back before noon on the fifth day. So the third day is prime territory. Anytime that day, and you have a fallback day of the fourth day if the realtor screws you over and doesn't remember to show up to let you in to get your canisters. Any questions? Yes.
It got, here they said the area must be sealed 12 hours prior to test.
Nobody bothers. Don't worry about it.
For closed house conditions, does it need to be like closed basement if that's what the canisters are, or is the whole house?
No. Closed room, basement.
So.
So they can
whatever
have the,
floor
they,
basically is
pardon?
on should be enclosed.
what, whatever floor it's on should be enclosed. So if it's in the living room, and air conditioning is kind of iffy. So you know, the windows are closed, but air conditioning is blowing all that air around. It is conditioned air, so it's kind of a judgment call. Joe, what do they say about air conditioned rooms?
Typically, you still need to turn all air handling moving devices should be in the shutdown position for that time period. Because
Does anybody do that? No.
Throughout the house or just in the area where?
Just in the area, on that floor. If you're in the basement,
Probably not.
you can have your air conditioning on the second floor going, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, go ahead and do a radon test and tell the people in August that they can't have their air conditioning on, see how that goes.
Over a hotel.
Or the winter without heat or force hot air.
Exactly. So, these go back to the laboratory, and they are going to get read. Now, one of the reasons why I use Ray Data is how quickly it gets to me. If I use UPS, and I ship it out at 4 o'clock, drop it off at 4 o'clock on Thursday, I have my reading at 5 o'clock on Friday, always next day at the end of the day. That's almost as good as being able to read it on the same day. Because UPS and New Jersey, if it comes in during the day, they stay until they get it out. They send all reports out at 5 o'clock. The issue you're going to find with laboratories is reliability of them not losing your canisters. And I went through about 5 laboratories. Once my local laboratory here shut down. We had one here in Clifton Park. He shut down business, and I scrambled around for a year. And there's nothing that's going to make you more enemies than doing a radon test, picking it up, mailing it out, and then having to come back 2 weeks later and redo the test because your laboratory lost the canisters. I had somebody say, yeah, they came in last Thursday. We can't find them. You're going to have to retest. Now you got to call your realtor with this sad sob story, and they don't believe you. They think you screwed up. You sent it to the wrong place. And you're blaming the laboratory. It's a traumatic experience. But I've been using RA Data for at least 6 or 7 years, and they've never failed, lost one since I went to UPS. They do have their nightmare in terms of their postal system. So if you do wind up at least starting off with RA Data, or there's one down in Long Island, in White Plains, RTCL, RTCA, Joe? What's the White Plains one?
I mean, Elmsford is
Elmsford.
RTCA.
RTCA, they're a New York one.
Yeah.
I've never used them, but the canisters are similar.
Everything is similar. The biggest thing is if you don't fill out, if you miss something on the sheet, they're not going to give you the information. You got to pay attention when there's winter storms. If there's winter storms and if the mailing gets, because they have to receive it within a certain time frame
Yes.
also. And if it's beyond the time frame because of
The-
mailing issues, it's nobody's fault, but you got to redo it. I mean,
That's why I say, if you're going to do these with canisters, UPS. That you have more chance of it getting there reliably than the postal service. And I've paid the price for that. I've lost realtors over the fact that, have you lost anybody because of delayed tests?
I had very upset people, realtors. I didn't lose any. I mean, they understood. It just, you apologize and you try to get things
And then the
going.
phone keeps ringing. Next day, is it there yet? Do you have anything for us? No, I'll call you when I do. Next day, they call again. I'll call you when I do. It's terrible.
They email you results? And
Yes. Well, RA Data has a website. They will email that it's been posted. Then you go in, you read it, and you can right-click and save it to your desktop, and then I include it in an email to my client. So I forward, I go in, make a PDF out of just a right-click on the form. So you go to their server, and there's a picture of it with the data. You right-click it, save as on your desktop, open up your email, put your client's email address in there, and then attach that report to them, and they'll have it in 2 minutes.
I used RTCA and I never had an issue. I loved them.
Right.
They also sold tables that held it exactly the right height, put them exactly the right distance apart, and the whole 9 yards. If you were new to it and you weren't sure of how things should be, that's something I would suggest.
Yeah, RTCA, a lot of inspectors in this area use it. I just found RA Data, and I love the fact that I get the report back. If I put it in UPS today, and if they're open the next day, then I have my report at 5 o'clock. It is as sure as rain.
It's like macro windows. So you're going to get the same product in the end. It's not going to make that much difference.
Speaking of the same product, let's talk about measuring devices. These are canisters. There are electronic devices. That is an electronic machine that reads, this isn't what it looks like, but it keeps a count, and it keeps a history and a log of your radon. It's a portable machine that you carry into, these are knobs up here. It's an electronic portable machine that operates off of batteries. You put it in the basement, just one of them. This is a certified piece of equipment, so it's valid. You set it there for 48 hours minimum. And then the certified user of that, who's been trained on that piece of equipment, can read the radon level on his window and report it immediately. The advantage to this machine is if somebody comes in and opens a window, you're going to see a timeline of any disturbances. So if it starts off high and then all of a sudden it goes down low, or it was low and all of a sudden goes high, or and you will find out that reading will tell you that somebody's monkeyed with it. Now, it won't tell you that the windows were open if the windows were open at the very beginning. But let's say you leave on the first day and your readings were like this, and come 7 o'clock at night, all of a sudden, it evened out like this, and then 2 hours before you showed up, it went back to this. Yeah, the average is going to be 3.0, but it sure looks a little hinky. That tells me I have an invalid test. Do we all understand why? $1,000 for this piece of equipment that will then sit in the back of your truck or vehicle in the trunk, and once a year it has to go off to the laboratory to be recalibrated. What's that tell you? Yes?
Joe made a good point the other day, he said, if you have multiple projects going on or inspections going on, you can't use that at the other inspection because it's already at another place.
Right, so I know guys that have these electronic devices have 4 or 5.
That's expensive.
Yes, it is. That's why I'm suggesting to you right now, start off with canisters. Make sure you can afford it before you spend money on an electronic device. That is inaccurate. Mathematically, if you've ever taken a statistics course, if it needs to be calibrated every year, randomly, all of them are 6 months out of calibration. Statistically saying, with the number that they're out of calibration averages out to 6 months, which is half of that year. So, the number is unreliable because that's at its best. What if he doesn't send it away for calibration? Nobody ever asks you whether your electronic piece of equipment is calibrated. Guess who's the first person who's going to ask you whether it was calibrated properly at the right time or not?
Lawyer.
That's exactly right. How often do you wind up in front of a lawyer? Hopefully, not very often. But if it is ever called into question, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to want to see records of its calibration periods. And they're going to compare it to when this inspection happened. And you better hope it's calibrated. When they send this back to calibration, they'll take it and put it in a room with, guess what? A charcoal canister. They bombard that room with radon particles at a known level or a higher level. They then take their radon the charcoal canister and put it in their $1 million machine that's calibrated daily, and they come up with a number that they feel is totally reliable. And then a technician walks over to the machine and makes the adjustment to get it to read to that. So which one do you think's more, given the field, given the average lifetime that a machine is in there, given the fact that it's hanging around in the truck, given the fact it may be out of calibration? This makes sense. It's cheaper and it's more accurate. And you have to wait 24 hours. But that's the issue. You don't lose, the good side of this is that whole thing with losing canisters doesn't happen if you have a machine. And you will know if it's invalidated. So they both have pros and cons. But certainly, in your situation, starting your business right now, buy a couple of these. In the book, I think RA Data's information is there. I'm not plugging them, but I am saying out of my experience, they are as reliable as you can get. Just use UPS. Get a couple of these ahead of time, because I have students that will give me a phone call. I got my first inspection tomorrow. Oh boy, do you have some canisters I can buy? Guess what my answer is? $100.
Nope.
I went to that, but then I was just being selfish. So I just said no. Because the less, I had one guy, home inspector, brand new, stormed away, came to my front door, needed canisters. I said no. He got mad at me, he cursed me and everything else, got in his car and drove away, and 2 weeks later he called me up and he says, okay, I calmed down, everything's fine, I apologize for the way I behaved. I know that you had canisters, but I also know that I didn't learn my lesson about being professional and having all my equipment ready to go. And if you were doing that to teach me a lesson. I said, well, bingo. Okay, so don't call me up looking for canisters. Don't call Joe, because he'll give them to you, and he'll.
No, I won't, because
he'll-
I called you one time, and you told me no, and I was in a jam. So I tell everybody here, I'm not going to give you nothing.
Shit. Because you don't envision yourself succeeding
Yep.
if you don't buy canisters. If you're afraid to spend $30 fucking, don't get into this business. You're going to have to spend more money to be successful than you're going to start off making. If you can't afford $30, you can't afford a website, you can't afford proper clothes, you can't afford test equipment. $30, $32 to be quite frank, and that includes the mailer.
How long is it good for? Until
1
you use
year.
it? 1 year?
So I'm not suggesting buying today, but certainly do it.
It's
Because
gonna
know
cost you,
You know you have 3 days before you're going to have to do that inspection. So when you get the sniff that, hey, I might be getting some business, that's the time to do it. You still have a 3-day window.
but it takes a day and a half. You call them up,
If you
You
call
call 'em up
before
at 2,
noon, if you call
call
before noon,
they'll
you'll
send
get
it out.
the next day, if it gets out that day.
So my suggestion is, go buy 2 sets of canisters. It's gonna run you like $60,
Right.
and get them now so you have them ready. And every time you're down to 1, you buy another set of 2 or another set of 4. And if you say you're booking them and you're like, okay, I got 3 inspections this week and I got 3 sets of canisters, well, you better order some now. So
And if you can't stay that organized on this small business that you have, I assure you, you will not succeed. Because as you hear from me saying all the time, this isn't about how good a home inspector you are. It's about how well you run your small business, how well you market, how well you network, and how the impression you make. And not having canisters is a bad impression. Okay?
How much does it cost to read them?
Pardon?
How much does it cost from the lab to read them?
it's
That's all
paid
in
in the
That's all
fee.
part of the-
That's
yeah.
the 32, okay.
That's the $32. They send it to you, you have a return label, and you send it back to them in that return label, and you get your email saying is they're all for $32.
What do you charge for a radar test?
Well, I charge 100, but I never play off of my price. My home inspection is $350. I do $100 termites and I do $100 radons. Those are my list prices. When I want to get a job, because I haven't been busy, I will go $350, and I'll tell you what, normally my radon's 100, my termite's 100, I'm gonna give you the termite for free. I always say the termite for free because I don't want to get caught giving them a radon for free, because that's actually costing me $30, where the termite doesn't have any costs. It's just me walking around filling out a report. So I'll give away one of them and make it $100. Oh, you use Samantha Smith as your realtor? All of her clients say, so now you made Samantha Smith happy with you because she sent a job to you, and those people believe that they saved $100 because they came from Samantha. So you're doing 2 things. You're sealing your deal at $450. You're crediting the fact that, oh, if Samantha sent you, what I do is I give free radon, I give free termite inspections for all of Samantha's clients that come to me. So it would be $350 for the home inspection. The radon is $100 and the termite is free because of Samantha. So I'm giving the price of $450. Now, I've been told that my prices are a tad low by local home inspectors, my students. But I was at this pricing 15 years ago, and there's still some guys underneath this. I believe, Joe, would you verify this? My $450, $475 for the package of radon, termite, and home inspection is about middle of the pack. He's more active than I am.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's,
550 is high.
it would say high, 475 to 550. That's the range. If you want to charge, $199, you're going to base things on volume, and you're going to be running all over the place. I say this: the market allows for this price range from 475 to 550.
Trust me, nobody balks at this. I've been
You just
doing
got to
it-
find your worth. What are you worth? And what's acceptable? And what is dollar per hour?
In your experience, what percentage of the inspections do?
Funny you should ask that. I tracked that for the first 6 years, and my average was 4%.
4% of the inspections?
Oh, that was radon higher than 4.0.
No.
Oh, well, I thought that was the natural
No.
question.
No, the question was.
For the record, 4.0 is 4% of all your radon will be 4% of all your radon tests will be 4.0 or higher.
Yeah.
Since
no.
that wasn't the question you're asking, why don't you now ask me the
Okay,
question you were going
the
to
question
ask?
was, of all of the home inspections you've done, what percentage of them did you do radon and,
How many people want it?
70.
70%?
Joe,
7 out of 10.
70?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. You guys will be surprised. Somebody will buy a $400,000 house, and all of a sudden, $50 becomes a big deal.
And,
So-
but I assure you, you will not succeed if you don't do radon testing.
You have to do it.
So bite the bullet, get your canisters, get comfortable with doing it, set up your routine. And for the record, the best routine is make sure you have your realtor's card, make sure it's the listing card, go to the listing agent and tell her, I need to set up, today's Monday, I need to set up a Thursday pickup. Do you have a card? Can we set a time now? She's going to sometimes say yes, sometimes says no, call me. Get her card, and no matter what you decide that day, call her Thursday morning to remind her. Oh yeah, I put it in the mail that day. The laboratory says we didn't see anything coming in. There's no proof. So who's that lead responsible? You. So it doesn't happen. Not in this side, not until you get your client's sign off that if anything goes wrong, it's there, not you. Okay? So never let, and they will do that. And some home inspectors make it a regular part of their routine. That, will you pick it up on Thursday? Okay, thank you. Here's the envelope. Here, I've already filled out the paperwork. Just put in the time that you sealed them up and mail them out. That's a part of their normal routine. I don't even see how you exist.
So that scenario that you gave, you showed up for a home inspection, then they decided the day of that they wanted to do that. Now, what would you do if over the phone before you even showed up, knowing that it's 2 hours away? Would you
I
raise,
charge them more
you
money
raise their
or
rate
tell them,
or
yes.
tell them no?
I tell them, no, I'll do the radon for you, but you're gonna pay me time and gas
Yeah.
for me to go back.
Okay.
So my price that I just quoted you is $475. If you want, no, $400. I wouldn't give them a discount if I'm just getting termite and a home inspection. So it's always $450.
No, I understand.
to $500.
I just wanted
So
to
we
know.
were at $450 with just the termite, and then he says to me over the phone, I think I'll do the radon.
$200 more dollars.
$200 more dollars.
Yeah.
$100 for, so $200 for my $30 canister, but I gotta drive there, go there and then go back 3 days later.
And explain that. Obviously, that's why it's so much.
That's exactly right.
Now, would you?
And you can get away with that if it's forever, because they know it's forever.
I mean, depending on how desperate you are for work or
Yeah.
money, would you just
What's your
turn them
time worth
down?
to you? I still go out and, I make pretty good money with running the school, and I still go out and do termite inspections for $100. Because I would prefer to earn $100 than sit at home doing nothing.
Mhm.
I mean, there are some nights where I gotta go pick up radon, and I'm driving for probably about 2 hours and 20 minutes because you gotta go up to Johnstown, then you gotta go to Saratoga, and then you gotta pick it up. It's part of.
And he's got family and kids, I'm sitting there doing nothing, I'll
But I already
I'll come
collected the
over-
money. That
Right.
like after I get out, it's like 2.5 hours of driving, but it's part of the job.
it's a part of the job.
What sucks is that when you walk into a basement, and all of a sudden you see the basement window open,
Yeah.
or you see the door open,
And now
you gotta go. Test failed.
And then you gotta go through the whole process all over again.
And you got to explain it to everybody why it failed. You have to. So it's important to take pictures of the door closed and the window shut and things like that. Because guess what? If someone manipulated that, there's a fee for me to come back, and it's twice as much. I don't come. Somebody manipulated. I have it closed, and someone manipulated. I charge $200, and people are like, "What?" And guess what? Unfortunately, I don't care who is. My client's pissed. The seller's pissed, and I go, "Seller, you got to pay for this. My client should. You should be
paid
controlled."
for one.
They already paid for one. Now you have to pay for it. And people are like, "Are you serious? $200? You're wasting my time now."
I mean, how are you going to get money out of the seller? They
Well,
can
guess
say-
what? The test has to be done, or the house doesn't sell.
And you put
And
these
everyone's
canisters
pissed
in,
off.
and you don't sit down and
It's
result.
It's a very tough situation, but guess what? For me, for my time to be wasted, it's going to cost you. And I have a point. Like Dan said, the store has to be closed. I explain it to everybody. The listing agent understands the importance. I tell everyone, if this is manipulated, there's a fee of $200. And they say, who pays for that? I go, typically, and I look at everybody, and sometimes the sellers are there. I go, you do, because you're wasting my time. I go, I don't have time for this. Trust me, if you guys become successful and you gotta drive back, it's a pain. And trust me, the $100 doesn't become worth it to do it. It's not worth it.
One of the things I used to do is when I, like say, if I was doing one on Tycon Road, I'd say, well, if I'm coming back up here, I want a meeting in your office, in the Railer's office or something like that. Find another way to justify it on top of that. Say you're going back up there, bring donuts like Dan suggested earlier. Find another reason to get up there and find an excuse to get into someone's door with it too, even.
What I do is I'll take one of these foldable TV tables. I'll open it up in the middle of the room. I have sealed a sheet of paper with 2 circles, and I have arrows randomly going in and out. And I'll set my canisters right there, dead in the middle. And then I gather my, when we're down in the basement, I said, this is the way I'm leaving this. I have set up this a certain way so that it cannot be tinkered with, or I'll know it's been tinkered with. Keep the windows closed. This is the radon test. If I have to come back because it's been tinkered with, it's going to cost extra money. But they don't know what these arrows are, so now they're afraid to say of not being. So let's say they take it and they put it out on the porch, because I've gone to pick up my radon canisters and found them out on the porch. In a little bag, he said, "Sorry, I had to leave. Here's your canisters." Oh. But they'll take them, send them out on the porch, and then an hour before you come back, you'll find them back on here, and you won't know. What I do if I'm suspicious, though, I have a smaller radon thing that are called tea bags, and it's a kind of a, you can hang it, and so what I do is I'll put these out, but they're phony. And then my real test is a tea bag that I've hung up in the floor joist in another part of the basement. And so I've done that before. So when I get there, I pick these up, I put them back in their container, and the realtor's sitting there watching me. And then I go over and I take that one down and I put it in its container. They say, "What's that?" I said, "That's the real radon test. This was just, I'm going to verify that this was accurate." And that's all you have to say.
Could you use one canister and one?
No.
Okay.
Same, they wouldn't be tested on the same piece of equipment. Those two are tested on the same piece of equipment, so the error rate is fantastically lower than 2 separate media done on 2 separate pieces of equipment. Wouldn't work. And plus, it's 2 separate companies. It probably could, because it's just a redoable test. But boy, I wouldn't, no reason to chance it. But I'll do that. I'll do the tea bagging and send it off to the tea bag company in case I think that there's going to be a problem or something. Because you get an idea that the realtor is a slime ball. Oh, did I say that out loud?
It's on tape.
It is on. I forgot. Any questions? Oh, let's talk remediation systems.
I have a quick question before you go into remediation systems, and maybe you'll answer this. But if a house already has a remediation system, do you still sample the same way?
We do not know whether that system is properly functioning or not.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is but I asked my client, "Do you want me to do it anyway? There is a radon system here. That tells me there's a problem.
Yep.
Do you want me to test to make sure that this is working okay? Or do you want to go with the fact that it's a newer system, or whatever the story is?" And they always say, "No, why don't you go ahead and verify it?" Because they've already been price imprinted what the radon was with the test, so they're happy. I did a Saratoga home that had a radon system in it. One of the big mansions on, you know, when you go down Broadway, and then it goes into all those houses after 9 turns off, and then that road. I had a house back there, a big old ancient mansion, and half of the basement was stone, and there was a radon remediation, meaning a stone floor. It was the top of a boulder, and then they poured the concrete around it, so there was a stone smoothly going over onto concrete. But I had exposed stone in the basement, and there was a radon system there. And I asked the client whether he wanted me to take a test and verify it, and he said sure. oh, that'd be great, could you do that? Yeah, okay, let's see if the system's working. And I came back with this was only about 2 or 3 years ago, I came back with a reading of about 47. Jesus. Joe's head popped up, 47. And with the radon system there. So, I reported that to the realtor and the clients. And then everybody goes, oh my God, you gotta be kidding. So I said, maybe you had better have somebody take a look. And they called the manufacturer. No, they called the dealer in that installed the radon system. He came in and checked out his system and said, oh, that's ridiculous. I just tested my system. I'm getting 3.1. And so they called me back and said, he says it's 3.1. And I said, well, I'm the first one in. He's going to verify his. Why don't you get a third independent one and get somebody that uses an electronic machine or another media? Let's check it all out, but we'll get a third opinion, and we'll let the third opinion decide. And so 3 days later, I got a phone call from my client. It says, his reading didn't agree with yours. I said, oh really? He says, yeah, it wasn't 45, it was 42. So, the contractor that installed it was blowing smoke up everybody's skirt. It hadn't been working all that time. So checking the system, that making sure that it works is a valuable thing that you're doing even if there's one there. Okay? Oops, not high enough. Okay, we all happy? Basement. Sump hole. Uranium. Radon particles. Basement has a level of 6.8. They want to remediate it. They got to reduce it. So what they do is they put in a PVC pipe into a hole that looks suspiciously like a sump hole, and they seal the top of it, and this PVC pipe goes down into the ground. And then this pipe goes up and vents out up here. What happens is right here, they take a 24-volt fan, and it's always on, and it's blowing air or drawing air in this direction. So what that does is it creates a negative pressure underneath the house, and it draws these radon particles in here instead of coming in the regular sump hole. So this negative pressure of this fan creates a magnetic action, for lack of a better word, of all these particles being drawn into this pipe and then escaping the pipe up here. So they're not allowed to enter the basement. And I've seen a demonstration on YouTube where they took green, a gas mixture, and poured it into the sump hole. Obviously, it had to be heavier than air, but they poured it for this demonstration into this hole, and about 30 seconds later, and they had this all, PVC was cleared, you could see into it. And so all of a sudden, green gas was coming up and being ejected. So, and it was validating the fact that there is a negative pressure going on underneath the foundation, drawing the radon particles here to go out so that they don't accumulate in the basement. That's your standard remediation system. What's another standard, unstandard remediation system?
Sealing it, I suppose.
Well, sealing it would stop it, but there's another one also.
Acid? Ventilating it?
Ventilating, open the windows, never close the windows. Just remember that. That seal, the tightness of it, and them getting there, keeps them there for their 4 days. And it's that accumulation that's the problem. If you have a basement you can't seal, what problem will you never have? Radon. So don't lose fact that you don't have to ventilate, you don't have to remediate, just don't seal it. Or do a better job of sealing it and keeping it out.
If they install a remediation system, do we go back and test again?
No, they are licensed and insured, et cetera. They will verify how good it is. Now, if your client asks you to do that, yeah, you might want to charge them another $100 to do it, because it's 2 trips. Radon's a pain in the freaking butt, because you go and you just you put it out, and then you got to go back 3 days later and pick it up again. And that's okay when it's your neighbor, but where do you live? Where do you live?
Oh, Troy?
You live in Troy. Troy, what if you had to go to Rotterdam twice? And they don't see you till 6. So now you're traveling through rush hour traffic to get there at 6. You don't want to do that twice. That's $100 isn't worth it. So I hate radon because I don't like having to go back. I love walking out of a home inspection and going home and writing my report, and then I'm done with that house. I'd give up that $100 in a heartbeat, but everybody needs you to do radon, and you won't be in business if you don't do radon. So it's an evil. So don't go out and look for problems. Not that you work, but you don't want to be traveling around more than you have to. Anything else?
So you said, as soon as you finish the inspection, you go home, do the report, and put that out for them. And then later on, you just make that an addendum to,
I don't do anything on the report other than saying a radon report was done and a report will be forwarded on my radon, on my home inspection report. And then I drive there, I pick up the canisters, I seal it, I drop it in the UPS. The next day at 5 o'clock, I will get a email saying it's posted. I then go to my computer, I right click, make a copy of it, and email it out to my client, and I'm done. The biggest issue in this whole thing is, in terms of just the troubles that you're going to face, is the realtor meeting you and the deal going okay, or the canisters being disturbed. It's typically the radon is if they don't disturb it and the realtor meets you there, or they give you the code to go into the door so you get to let yourself in. Now you get to show up when you want to show up. And you don't have to worry about the radon, the realtor meeting you there or abandoning you there. Okay. Any additional questions? Now, there's multiple different types of testing equipment. We only talked about 2. There's different periods of time. Just remember, in our industry, in this area, you either use an electronic piece of equipment or you use radon canisters, and all tests take 2 days to 5 days. And that's all you need to know. You are liable for location, location, location. Use your judgment in terms of where you're putting it out, lowest livable floor, that's all you're responsible for. And then getting the report to your client in a timely manner. Anything else?
how accurate is this graph or map or whatever?
Ask Joe, he's the one that found it and put it in the book.
What's that?
Your map of radon areas.
So that's a little older one, so what ends up happening is anytime you send the radon canisters to any of the chosen suppliers or vendors, if there is a failure in that area, they notify New York State. So I thought they would state to New York, or identify in New York, any readings in New York State, so they're constantly updating that. That came right out of, New York State, it's just a chart. General areas in ours, Rensselaer, Scotia Glenville, things like that have a lot of shale and things.
I think RTCA said they were gonna send all of my data to the state automatically at the end of the year, I think.
Oh, really?
I think they just did that automatically because the state required it. And they were, because that, like you say, when I was working under their license, they were the ones that were required to do it, so.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
You got a question?